The moment I stepped into the office that morning, I felt every pair of eyes slice through me like sharp blades. And before I could even reach my desk, I heard someone whisper, "Did she borrow those clothes from a thrift store dumpster?" My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept walking, pretending their laughter didn't sting, pretending I didn't hear my hour department's self-appointed queensy loudly. Some people really shouldn't come to work looking like they crawled out of a bargain bin. I wanted to scream, to cry, to disappear, but I had learned long ago that silence was my shield. And today, more than ever, I needed that shield. The faded blue shirt I wore had a missing button, and my shoes had a crack near the sole. They weren't pretty, but they were all I had. "Morning, guys," I whispered, forcing a smile, but Maya just smirked and nudged her friend. "Oh, she thinks she's one of us," she said, loud enough for the whole office to hear, and the laughter that followed felt like a slap. I sat at my desk and pretended to check emails, though my screen was blurry through the tears I refused to let fall. They didn't know that the reason I dressed this way wasn't because I didn't create, was because I was hiding. They didn't know who I really was, what family I came from, or the life I had run away from. They just saw a girl in cheap clothes and assumed they knew everything, and maybe that was the part that hurt the most. "Don't mind them," whispered Daniel from accounting as he placed a cup of tea on my desk. "They're cruel to anyone who doesn't look like them?" I nodded, grateful, though I kept my eyes on the screen. "It's fine," I lied. "I'm used to it." But inside, something trembled, something tired of being stepped on. I could feel the pressure building, a storm forming deep in my chest. And little did they know, their mocking laughter wouldn't last much longer. Because in 24 hours, everything would change. In 24 hours, they would see me step out of a silver jet with my family's crest painted across the tail. In 24 hours, they would learn the truth I'd been burying for years. I wasn't the poor girl they thought I was. I was the heiress they could never imagine. Asterisk, that entire day felt like a battle I was fighting alone. And with every passing hour, the tension grew heavier, like someone was slowly tightening a rope around my chest, making it harder to breathe. And by lunchtime, Maya had found a new way to humiliate me when she walked past my table in the cafeteria, glanced at my simple homemade sandwich, and laughed. "Oh, look. She's eating peasant food again," causing her group to burst into giggles while I stared at my hands, pretending her words didn't burn into my skin like acid. But Daniel, who sat across from me, leaned forward and whispered, "Why do you let them treat you like this?" And I sighed, because how could I explain that keeping a low profile was the only way to feel safe? That the more invisible I was, the more control I had over my own life. But that afternoon, as I returned to my desk, everything shifted when my phone buzzed with a message from my father. A name I had avoided for months, and the text read, "We need to talk. Your presence is required tomorrow. The jet will be sent at 9 a.m. My stomach dropped, and suddenly the room felt too small, the air too thin, and my hands trembled as I locked my screen, hoping no one had seen. But of course Mia noticed my shaken expression and strutted over, arms crossed, smirking like she had just caught me stealing. "What's wrong?" she mocked, tapping my desk with her sharp red nails. "Did your thrift store card get declined?" The old me would have stayed quiet, swallowed the insult, but something cracked inside me, and I met her eyes with a calmness that startled even me. "Not everything is what it seems," I said softly. She blinked, surprised, then rolled her eyes as if my words were nothing but a joke. "Sure, sweetheart," she sneered. "Let us know when your royal carriage picks you up." Her friends laughed again, but their voices suddenly felt distant, muffled, like I was hearing them from underwater. All I could think about was tomorrow out, the jet, the family crest, and the life I had left behind because I didn't want to be controlled anymore. I had chosen freedom over luxury, anonymity over fame, peace over money. But now that world was pulling me back, and I had no idea what would happen once it collided with the life I had built here. All I knew was that tomorrow would expose everything. That night, I barely slept, lying in my small apartment on a mattress that sank in the middle, staring at the ceiling as waves of memories I'd tried so hard to forget crashed over me, reminding me of long hallways lined with marble, glittering chandeliers, and the constant pressure of being the perfect daughter. And I kept thinking about how tomorrow would rip open every part of the life I had carefully hidden. But I also knew there was no escaping it when my father used words like required and presence, words that were rules in disguise. So when the sun finally rose, painting the room in tired shades of gold, I forced myself out of bed and changed into the same simple clothes I always wore, because I refused to show up at the office looking like someone I wasn't anymore. And as I walked into work, pretending nothing was unusual, Mia's voice sliced through the morning air the moment she spotted me. "There she is," she said, leaning dramatically against the front desk. "Still rocking the charity shop aesthetic?" "I see." And her friend snickered behind her as she gave me that same cruel smirk, the one she wore like expensive perfume. But instead of shrinking back, I simply said, "I'll be leaving early today." She raised a brow. "Oh, big plans?" I didn't answer, and that irritated her more than a direct insult ever could. But before she could say anything else, Daniel approached, concern in his eyes as he whispered, "Are you okay?" "You look tense," and all I could manage was a small nod because if I spoke, the truth might spill out, and I wasn't ready for that yet. The hours dragged, each minute pulsing with anxiety, and I kept checking the clock as if time might change its mind and slow down for me, but of course it didn't. And at exactly 8:45 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A simple message: "We have arrived." My heart stopped. My palms grew cold. I felt every beat echo loudly in my ears, and when I stood up from my desk to grab my bag, Mia noticed instantly. "Leaving already?" She taunted. "Did a bus break down and need you to push it?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. All I could do was walk toward the glass doors, the entire office watching, confused, curious, whispering. None of them knew that outside, beyond those doors, the jet black limousine with my family emblem on the side was waiting to take me to the private airstrip. And once they saw it, nothing would ever be the same. The moment the glass doors slid open and the cold morning air brushed against my face, I saw Ida's sleek black limousine parked right at the entrance. Polished so perfectly it reflected the entire building like a mirror. And standing beside it was James, my family's senior attendant, dressed in the same charcoal suit I'd seen him wear since I was a child, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable, and for a second, my legs froze because seeing him here felt like the past reaching out and grabbing my wrist, pulling me back into a world I had begged to escape. But he bowed slightly and said in his deep, calm voice, "Miss Arya, your father is waiting," and the sound of my real nominate the shortened, ordinary version I used for sent a shiver down my spine. Behind me, through the tinted office windows, I could see silhouettes pressing closer, whispering, trying to understand what they were witnessing, and as I took a step toward the limo, the office doors burst open and Mia stumbled out, confusion written all over her face. "Wait," she called out, jogging closer in her high heels. What is this? Some kind of joke?" I didn't answer, and her confusion quickly twisted into annoyance. "Who is that? Why is that car here for you?" she demanded, but before I could speak, James turned to her and said, "Miss Arya has an urgent appointment. Please do not delay her departure." Mia's jaw dropped at the formality in his tone. at the way he spoke to her like she was a minor inconvenience in a world far above her understanding, and she stepped back, blinking rapidly. "Arya," she repeated, as if tasting the name for the first time. I opened the limo door and felt the familiar scent of leather and cedar wrap around me, like a memory I hadn't invited. But as I settled into the seat, I couldn't stop myself from glancing at the office entrance one last time. Dozens of faces stared back confused, shocked, whispering. Some even pointed. But Mia just stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if reality had suddenly split in front of her. The door closed with a soft thud, cutting off the world I had tried so hard to belong to. And as the limo pulled away from the curb, my heart raced with a mix of fear and inevitability. Tomorrow, they would learn exactly who I was. But today, the truth was only beginning to unravel. As the limousine glided through the city, I pressed my forehead lightly against the cool window, watching the tall buildings blur past like fading memories, and the further we drove, the more I felt the two halves of my life stretching in opposite directions, threatening to tear me apart, because I had worked so hard to build a world where no one cared about last names or bank accounts or legacy. Yet now I was heading straight back into the center of the life where all those things defined. Every breath I took, and I couldn't stop wondering why my father suddenly wanted me back after months of silence. James sat across from me, his hands folded neatly on his lap, giving me a respectful distance, but his iced-out calm carried a heaviness that made my stomach twist. "Is he angry?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper, and James hesitated before answering, which was never a good sign. "Your father is concerned," he said carefully. "There are matters within the family that require your presence. Matters." That word always meant something serious, something inevitable, something that wouldn't go away no matter how far I ran. My fingers tightened around the strap of my old bag, the same bag Mia had laughed at countless times, and suddenly it felt absurd that in a few minutes, I would be stepping onto a jet worth more than the entire office building I worked in. We turned off the main road, driving toward the private airstrip hidden behind high security gates. And as the guards recognized the emblem on the limo, the gates slid open without hesitation. My chest tightened as the jet came into view, sleek, silver, elegant, with the crest of my family's name painted boldly across the tail. It looked exactly the same as the last time I saw it, and the sight of it sent a rush of memories pouring through me. Long flights to formal events, suffocating expectations, cameras, interviews, and the constant reminder that everything about me was a reflection of the family. The car stopped beside the stairs leading up to the jet, and for a moment I just sat there, frozen, trying to gather the courage to step into a world I had sworn I'd never return to. "Miss Arya," James said softly, "your father doesn't like to be kept waiting." I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped out, feeling the weight of my past settle onto my shoulders like an old, heavy coat. The engines hummed in the background, ready to take me back to the life I thought I'd escaped forever. The wind whipped around me as I climbed the steps to the jet, each metal tread echoing like a countdown toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. And when I stepped inside, the familiar scent of polished wood and citrus cleaner wrapped around me, sending a jolt of nostalgia mixed with dread straight through my chest. But what froze me in place was the sight of my father sitting at the far end of the cabin, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, his silver hair slicked back, his expression unreadable as always, and for a moment I felt 10 years old again, small and terrified of disappointing him. "Arya," he said, not cold but not warm either, just controlled, and I forced myself to walk forward, my cheap shoes silent against the plush carpet that once felt like home. "You summoned me," I replied, trying to sound stronger than I felt, and he raised an eyebrow the way he did whenever he didn't appreciate my tone. "I requested you," he corrected, because the family must address a pressing issue. The words tightened my throat, but before I could ask what issue, he continued, "Your brother has stepped down from his responsibilities. You are next in line." My knees almost buckled, and I gripped the nearest seat to steady myself because this was the one thing I'd run from my entire life. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I left for a reason. I can't go back to all that pressure, all those expectations." He cut me off with a single look, the kind that silenced entire boardrooms. "This is not about your comfort, Arya. This is about the family, about the company, about what you were raised to do." My chest burned, my eyes stung, and all the years I'd spent building a simple, peaceful life suddenly felt fragile, like something he could shatter with a single sentence. "I have a job," I argued, but he scoffed softly. "A temporary distraction, nothing more." The dismissal hit me like a slap. He had no idea how hard I had worked to survive without the safety net of our wealth, how deeply I valued the independence he saw as meaningless. Before I could respond, the jet door closed, and the engines roared to life, sealing my fate for the moment. I sank into the seat across from him, feeling the vibration of the power beneath us, knowing that with every passing second I was being pulled further from the life I wanted and deeper into the life I feared. As the jet cut through the clouds, I sat rigidly in my seat, staring at the polished table between us while my father scrolled through his tablet, as if he hadn't just unraveled the life I'd spent years building and every beat of the engines. It felt like a reminder that I was trapped, suspended between the world I chose and the world that claimed me by blood. And after what felt like an eternity, he finally set the tablet down and said, "You've been gone long enough, Arya. It's time you returned to your place." But something inside me snapped, something raw and tired of being pushed, and I lifted my gaze to meet his. "My place?" I repeated, my voice trembling but fierce. "My place is anywhere I choose." "Not where you decide for me?" He studied me with a look I couldn't decipher. Was it disappointment, surprise, or just cold calculation? And when he spoke again, his tone held a sharp edge. "You're a part of this family, whether you like it or not. Running away does not erase your responsibilities." I clenched my teeth, remembering all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep in this very jet, overwhelmed by expectations I never asked for, and I whispered, "Freedom isn't running away. It's something I earned." He leaned back, his expression tightening. "You earn nothing without the name I gave you." That sentence felt like a blade sliding between my ribs, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. But before the silence consumed me, James approached quietly from the back of the cabin and placed a file on the table. My father opened it and slid a document toward me, an official notice stamped with our family emblem. "The board wants stability," he said. "Your return will reassure them." I stared at the paper, my heart pounding, because I knew what this meant. Once I signed anything, my choices would vanish, swallowed by obligations. "I won't do it," I said, pushing the document back. "I won't be controlled again." My father's jaw tightened, and he exhaled slowly through his nose. A sign I remembered from my childhood was running out of patience. "You misunderstand," he said calmly, too calmly. "This is not a request." The words were soft, but they crashed over me like thunder, and as the plane continued its steady ascent, I realized that this wasn't just a trip home. It was a battle for the life I wanted, the life he refused to acknowledge, and I had no idea how far he was willing to go to drag me back into his world. The jet finally descended toward our private estate, the sprawling mansion growing larger beneath the clouds, like a reminder of everything I'd tried to leave behind. And as the wheels touched the runway, my heartbeat echoed in my skull, a steady drum of panic mixed with defiance, because even though my father believed he could simply summon me back into this life, he had no idea how much I had changed, And when the jet door opened, warm air rushed in carrying the familiar scent of pine, trees, and expensive perfume that always lingered around the estate. And I stepped out reluctantly, my cheap clothes looking painfully out of place against the pristine white pavement and the row of luxury cars waiting outside. But as I walked beside my father, I kept my chin high, refusing to let the weight of the past crush me. Inside the mansion, servants lined up with polite bows, but their eyes flickered with something of surprise, confusion, maybe even piteous if they knew the storm brewing beneath the polished floors. And when I entered the grand hall, the echo of my footsteps bounced off the marble, just like it had when I was a child running from tutor to tutor, trying to please everyone and failing miserably. My mother appeared at the top of the staircase, elegant as ever in a long cream dress, her expression a carefully placed mask of gentleness that cracked only when she saw me. "Arya," she breathed, walking down the steps with controlled grace. And when she reached me, she cupped my face in her hands like she hadn't spent months avoiding my calls. "You look tired." I pulled back slightly, not ready for the affection she only offered when it aligned with the family's image. And before I could respond, my father stepped forward and announced, "She will be attending the board meeting tomorrow. We need to finalize the transition." My mother's eyes darted between us, worry seeping through her practiced calm. "Darling, perhaps she needs time," but he cut her off immediately. "There is no time." The tension knotted between us so tightly that the air felt heavy, and I forced myself to speak. "I'm not staying," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I came because you insisted, but I'm leaving after this meeting." My father turned toward me slowly, his jaw tightening. "You think you can walk away again?" he asked, his tone dangerously quiet, and every part of me trembled but beneath the fear. Something stronger was forming, something that had been growing ever since the first cruel laugh back at the office. I wasn't the obedient daughter he remembered, and tomorrow he would finally see that. That night, alone in the room I hadn't slept in for years, I sat on the edge of the enormous velvet bed, staring at the moonlight spilling across the floor like a silent reminder of everything I wanted to escape. And as I traced the patterns on the carpet with my eyes, memories pressed against me from all sides, me father's strict lessons, the endless etiquette classes, the suffocating expectation sand for the first time since boarding the jet. I felt the full force of how trapped I truly was. Yet beneath the fear, a quiet determination pulsed, growing stronger with every breath I took, because I realized that my father didn't just want me back. He wanted control, the same control he had tried to keep over me my entire life, and I refused to let him cage me again. I stood up and walked to the old vanity table, its gold edges shining softly under the dim lights, and when I looked into the mirror, I didn't see the timid girl who used to live here. I saw the woman who had spent months working long shifts, eating cheap lunches, surviving without a single ounce of her family's wealth. And that woman wasn't afraid anymore. My phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence, and when I picked it up, I saw a message from Daniel. "Are you okay? You never came back. People are talking." His concern warmed something inside me, reminding me that I had a life outside these walls, a life I wasn't willing to lose, so I typed back quickly, "I'm fine. I'll explain soon," even though my hands trembled as I hit send. A soft knock on my door made me jump, and when my mother peeked inside, her expression was gentler than it had been earlier. "May I come in?" she asked softly, and despite everything, I nodded. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, and for a moment she simply studied me, like she was searching for the daughter she no longer recognized. "Your father can be forceful," she whispered, choosing her words carefully, "but he believes he's doing what's best for the family." I let out a short, humorless laugh. Best for the family or best for him? Her eyes flickered, revealing more truth than she intended, and she lowered her voice. You must be careful tomorrow. The board, they expect obedience. I felt a spark of fire ignite inside me. Then they're in for a surprise, I said quietly, and even my mother seemed startled by the strength in my voice. Because tomorrow wouldn't be the victory my father expected. Tomorrow, I would finally take my life back. Morning arrived with a thick tension that clung to the walls like fog. And as I stepped into the grand hallway, dressed in the same simple clothes I'd worn to the office, the staff exchanged confused glances, clearly expecting me to appear in designer labels and diamonds. But I walked with steady steps, refusing to let the mansion change the woman I had become. And when I reached the boardroom, a massive room lined with portraits of generations who had ruled the company before me, the board members stood as I entered, their expressions tight with judgment, curiosity, and calculation. And my father sat at the head of the table, radiating authority as if the entire room bent to his will. Let's begin, he said, gesturing toward the empty seat beside him. A seat meant for his successor, but instead of sitting there, I remained standing, my heartbeat loud but my voice steady. Before anything begins, I said, I need to speak. A ripple of surprise moved through the room, but before my father could silence me, I continued, I'm not taking this position. I'm not joining the company, and I'm not returning to this life. My father's eyes darkened. Arya, sit down, he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. But I didn't move. No, I said louder this time. I've spent my life being told what I should be, how I should act, who I should become. But I've finally built a life that makes me happy, a life where I am treated like a human, not a symbol. A murmur spread through the board, and one of the older members leaned forward. You understand the consequences of refusing your duty? I nodded. I do, and I accept them. My father slammed his palm against the table, rising to his feet. You are embarrassing this family. I met his anger with calm defiance. You embarrassed me first by deciding my future before I ever had a chance to choose it. The silence that followed was electric, and even the portraits on the walls felt like they were watching, waiting. Finally, I reached into my bag and pulled out the old ID card from my modest office job, holding it up for them to see. This, I said, is who I choose to be. Someone who earns her own way. Someone who is free. Without another word, I placed the ID on the table and walked out, leaving my father speechless for the first time in my life. And when I stepped outside the mansion, with family jet waiting to take me wherever I commanded, I shook my head and told the pilot, take me back to the city, because the girl they mocked for her cheap clothes was already wealthier in freedom than any of them would ever be.